out solitary. It is week 199, and we are talking about how we found our patron and matron. Now, I will fair warn you that this is going to be a little bit of a story time, and I'm going to try to condense many, many years into one tiny video. So pause this video right now, get yourself some coffee, some tea, whatever you'd like for story time. So, as with most of the people that I know, my first real interaction with other gods was Greek. So I've always been a really earthy spiritual person, and I always believe that the spirits around us were interacting with us. But I didn't really have a god complex at that point in time. So the first gods that I really dug into were Greek. And the first god and goddess, I will say goddess because the first one that really appealed to me was Artemis and her brother Apollo. More so Artemis than Apollo. But I spent numerous hours researching Artemis and her cult following and how that played into their daily lives and things like that. And so Artemis was my first gateway goddess, is what I lovingly refer to her as. There's always a special place in my heart for Artemis, but that wasn't my settling place. So after Artemis and Apollo, I fell heavily into Egyptian. I would have dreams about Egyptian temples, and I would have dreams about the desert and the flooding of the Nile and the hippopotamuses and the papyrus leaves. And one of the first goddesses that set forward from that was Sekhmet. But it wasn't in a follow me type of way. It was more a introduction, another gateway. From that, I spent a lot of time with Sekhmet, and I tried desperately to have a matron relationship with Sekhmet, but it's not in the cards. So, within Kemetic Orthodoxy, there's a term that's called beloveds, and so I tend to find that I find myself referencing Sekhmet as a beloved. I spent a lot of time and honor and offerings to her. However, she never really jived with that mother figure. But she led me into Set, or Sukkoteth, which is the Egyptian god of chaos and the desert. And I won't go into that, but Set was the first male god that I ever felt truly drawn to, that I ever felt a relationship with, and it was really heavily learning at that point. I didn't dedicate myself to any particular god for a very long time. And Set kind of took a step back, even though that bond was innate for me. And then I kind of transferred into, and I'm not sure how this happened, but I was really called to Kali and Ganesh. And as you can tell back there, Ganesh is still very much a part, or Ganesha is still very much a part of my life. There have been numerous obstacles in which I have turned to Ganesh for, and I also consider Ganesh a beloved. He has a place, he has his own shrine, obviously. There are offerings, there are prayers, there are adorations that are given to Ganesh. There's another one who I do not have a representation of, but that is Kali. Kali was very pivotal in a very rough part of my life, and she served as an encourager. I wouldn't say like a mother matron figure. I would say like that auntie that's like, pull your shit together, let's get on with this show. The one who parties with you hardcore when you're just out of control. That was Kali for me. And I thought that they were my patron and my matron, but after that transitional period, after, my life kind of calmed down, there weren't so many obstacles, there weren't so many violent things that I needed to get through. Ganesh and Kali stepped back as well. And so, again, they're kind of added to my beloveds. So Ganesha, Kali, Artemis, Sekhmet. Now, Set still proved to be very forward in my life. I constantly feel like I was getting promptings and things like that. Around that time in my life, I started working for a cemetery. And Anubis, or Nipu, became very, very prevalent. And is still very, very prevalent. I have died several times. Well, not several. I've died twice. And been brought back. And so Anubis, I feel a very strong connection to Anubis, but I wouldn't consider him my patron. He just joins in what I like to call my little council of beloveds. And then there was a very quiet period in my life. I had been through a violent divorce. I had been through not very nice things. Not to the extent of when Kali and Ganesha were prevalent, but it definitely put me into a quieter perspective, a more introverted perspective, to kind of take stock of my life and decide who I was going to be, and what I was going to allow to mold me. Which is when Nuts became extremely prevalent. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Nut is the goddess of the night sky. And her counterpart, her consort, is Geb, who is the god of earth. So Nut is still very, very prevalent to me. And I use a lot of time to go outside and things like that, and revel in all the things. But there was an odd transition that happened while Nut and I were becoming very familiar, and another goddess stepped forward. Now this is one I did not anticipate, and that was Nephthys, who is the lady of the house. She's more commonly referred to as the sister of Isis, but I feel like that makes her a secondary goddess in a lot of people's opinions, and I feel very strongly that that's not a good representation of her. I mean, who wants to be represented by their sibling? No one. Because we're individual people. And so Nephthys and I have a extremely in-depth, quiet affair. I wouldn't say that I am a fervent put Nephthys everywhere, but Nephthys definitely touches all of the parts of my life, and how I present myself, and how I've maintained my life and my compass. So if I had a matron, I would consider Nephthys my matron goddess. As for patron, Set has always stepped forward, so I guess I would classify him as that. But I've also had numerous gods that have stepped forward and helped along the pathway. So for me, it's hard to say that I have one patron or one matron. I would say that I have gods that are more prevalent during different times in my life, depending on what I need. And that changes throughout the thing. This is, I've lost count, but at least 15 years in, I've transitioned several times, as you guys can see. And so right now, I would say that those two are still prevalently what I would consider the mother and father figure of the gods for me. But I know that there's a possibility that those could change, because it has happened in the past. So I'm interested in the comment section below. Have you guys had transition god teams, goddess teams, divinity teams? Or has it consistently been one god or goddess? Let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next week when we are talking about elementals. Until then, I will see you next time.